All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Thin Line Podcast. Today, we are talking about lessons that we have learned on the mountain and how we have taken them off the mountain. As usual, I'm here with my esteemed co-host, Eric Recker and Barbee Fagan. How are you two doing?
Outstanding.
Outstanding.
There we go. Love to hear it. So let's talk a little bit about lessons that we have learned on the mountain and how we have taken them off the mountain and applied them to our daily non-mountain lives. Eric, let's start with the question around resilience, if you don't mind. Can you talk to me a little bit about the lessons on the mountain in terms of resilience and how you have taken that off the mountain and just what you have noticed? Like, there's a specific quote that you have around that, but what you have noticed around that word.
Yeah, I think the future is going to belong to the people who are most resilient. We are bombarded with bad news constantly, depending on how much time we spend on our phone, what we're looking at, what our news sources are, who we're spending time with. Negativity is downhill sledding. It's easy. It's really easy. It takes work and effort to be a positive person. It's worthwhile work. But one thing that I'm really finding out is just being fascinated by people who are very, very, very resilient. So the quote goes something like this: resilient people do not have fewer problems. They just have faster reset times. So something bad happens at 9 a.m., they feel it, process it, deal with it, and by 10 a.m., they're back to working on their priorities. And I'm just fascinated by that. And I'm thinking about that based on, okay, something happens to me that's not ideal. Maybe it's something bad happens at work. Something happens with a patient, with a team member, with a family member. Is that going to ruin my day, or am I going to try to learn from what happened, process it, and then get moving back? You have a bad lap in 29:29. Is that going to define you? Are you going to give up, or are you going to make adjustments, seek wisdom from other people, figure out why it went wrong, and then move forward? So the people who are able to do that and move on are going to be so far ahead of the people who are walking around dragging their butt on the ground saying, this happened to me. So much more of a victim mentality versus this happened to me, but this does not define me.
Yeah, I think that quote is great. And I'll tell you, for a long time in my life, I would, and I visualize scenarios and I visualize outcomes. And we've talked about expectations around outcomes, but I would visualize when we got into 29 event, I would visualize what a perfect day on the mountain would look like. And that's great from being able to put yourself in that place and being able to see how each step is going to go. But I think you just nailed it. And this is something else you've talked about. It's not as if it's going to go that way, right? And Barbie in the last episode talked about Tremblant and her lap 8-9, which coincidentally was her bib number in Tremblant. But it doesn't always go that way. It's actually a long day out there, and things will go wrong. And so you're hitting on exactly, it's not that people aren't going to hit those problems. It's how they respond to those problems. And I don't know, do you want to talk about the fact that, sometimes it's a long day out there, whether it's on the mountain, at work, in your lives, and so forth?
And so, yeah, and I learned this lesson. I actually had a triathlon coach before I did my first Ironman. He said, Eric, I want you to understand something. It's a long day. Something will go wrong. And I'm like, well, yeah, obviously something's going to go wrong, whatever, but it's not going to be that big of a deal. Like, I'm going to cross the finish line. Everything's going to be great, right? So we're in North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, for a Ironman distance, but not branded race called Beach to Battleship. And it started out with an intercoastal water swim, and started when it was just, the sun was barely coming up. It was October. Imagine how warm the intercoastal water was at that point. And I had my Garmin watch on. Now this Garmin, it was a big watch. You think of the old Garmins, it's almost like it was a laptop screen on your wrist. But I'm swimming and so cold, and this was a mass start. So everybody's kicking and doing everything, not trying to kick other people, but it happens. And I get kicked really hard in the wrist, and my Garmin separates itself from my body and goes to the bottom of the water. And I'm probably 200 meters into a 2.4 mile swim and 112-mile bike ride and marathon after that. And my watch was my bike computer. My watch was my run cadence, my power meter. It gave me all the metrics. And all of a sudden, I learned that lesson. It's a long day. Something will go wrong. Fortunately, my wife had a pink Timex ladies Ironman watch that she could toss to me with a screen that was about that size. And I had to do the whole race by feel. The only way I knew how fast I was going on my bike is I did 5-mile splits on my watch. The only way I knew how fast I was running is I did 1-mile splits. That was it. But that was the thing that went wrong. What are you going to do when something goes wrong? Terrible day. I lost my watch and this sucks and I hate this and woe is me. No, you regroup, you get back in it, so that you can still finish the thing. And it happens all the time. We're doing a team project in work. It's a long day. Something will go wrong. We have something that happens with our family. It's a long day. Something will go wrong. You expect it, process it, and move on. Easier said than done, but once you start working that muscle, you will understand how important it is to do that if you want to move forward in life.
To the point about easier said than done, just talk about some of the experimentation or application, either one, that you have done in the real world where you've challenged yourself and being, okay, I realize this. Now, how do I self-solve for it in the real world? If you have an anecdote or a story that you can apply to that.
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of micro resets, little things that we can do to get us right back in the moment. So one of my favorites is a physiologic sigh. So when something bad happens to us, we get into a sympathetic state. Everything is heightened. We're shallow breathing just based on it with our chest. Our heart rate goes up. We might be flushed. We're sweating more. We're having all of this stuff. Our body's in fight or flight mode. We got to get out of that. So a physiologic sigh is taking a huge deep breath with your diaphragm, huge belly breath, and then taking one more little breath so that everything's full and then letting it out audibly. So it looks like this. And I did that faster, but you do that, and all of a sudden, if you do that slowly and focus on the inhale and focus on the exhale, your body goes from that sympathetic fight or flight state to a parasympathetic calm state. Mm. Or you have some saying that you say in your mind, I can do hard things. Or you remind yourself of the present moment. Or in between meetings, instead of picking up your phone, you go for a walk around the block. Or you go stand outside with the sun on your forehead for 5 minutes. Or you stand in a Superman pose in front of a window and just breathe. It's these little things. Or write 3 things down that you're grateful for in a journal. All of these things take you from this heightened area to and when you do that, then you're in a more calm state. You're more likely to make a good decision to move forward. So when something's wrong with our phone, what do we do with it? We power it off, try it again. When something's wrong with our computer, we hit Control, Alt, Delete. Computer shuts off, reboots. Problem is quite likely solved. So how many times in our lives can we push Control, Alt, Delete during the day to get us back in the game? So those are a couple things that have been instrumental for me. Barbie, what's worked for you?
Yeah. I was going to say, I feel like I've pressed Control, Alt, Delete numerous times, hundreds of times in my life, and getting back up, right? You've heard fall down 7, get back up 8. And, that's another Japanese quote. I don't know the actual Japanese saying, but, you watch people throughout life. You watch them on the mountain, you watch them in the airports, you watch them in work, when small things can completely derail them. And it's those that do what you said, that just slow down, that pause, right? We're on that thin line between the action and then the reaction. What are we going to do next? By the way, Coach Trish and Coach Jared would be very proud of you for doing the breathing. And we did do that right before we set foot up the mountain Friday morning at 6 a.m. Coach Jared took us through breathing exercises, the exact one that you shared with us, because everyone's ramped up. Their heart rates are going, their blood pressure is up, they're ready to go. And we needed to down regulate because it's a long day. something will go wrong. So let's start down here at baseline instead of way, way up here. I'm going to share a kind of funny story that most everyone has experienced in their life. That's the airport. So I was leaving Mount Tremblant, headed to Montreal on Monday, excited to get back home and see all my family. And I get, your flight is delayed. And I'm like, all right. I look, terrible weather in Chicago and Wisconsin. Violent, like traumatic tornadoes. Okay, so now I'm resetting at that point. I'm like, all right, you want to get home, but these people are experiencing devastation. So now I'm balancing what's happening and how I can react. The day goes on, and then I get, your flight is canceled. Okay. All right. I look at my watch. Heart rate's about 50 because I am controlling the controllables. There was absolutely nothing I could do, nor did I want to get on that airplane to Chicago during that. And that's being resilient again in the moment. I saw people yelling at, service desk people. I saw people just pacing and doing all those things. And then I saw several like me that were just, hey, this is what it is. So I can't control what's happening. I can absolutely control how I feel through this. And then there was all these good things that came out of it. My brother came to my aid. I met a staff person from 29029 down at the baggage area. I just kept having all these other things happen because I allowed myself to just be patient through it. And I knew I'd get back eventually, and I did, clearly. So again, just being resilient, not only on the mountain when things happen, when you're struggling, but just in life with these little things that absolutely can derail some of us. And I have a quote that I heard from Coach Chris that he took from Sigmund Freud. It is one of my most favorite quotes, and it is, in retrospect, the struggle will strike you as most beautiful. And what did I get out of this, delayed airplane? I met some new people. I had some conversations. What did I gain out of lap 8-9? People coming to my aid, people lifting me up, eventually getting me to the top of that summit. So every moment when we have a chance to be in the struggle and we find our way out, whether it's through a breath, whether it's through Control Alt Delete, it truly is, when you look back in retrospect, a beautiful thing to be able to go through that struggle and come out on the other side.
I don't personally love the struggle at all. And maybe this is where I'm still maturing as a person and as an adult. I do not enjoy or value that struggle. And I know that there is learning that comes from it. I work really hard to try to avoid that struggle by putting in the work up front. But I think I do need a little bit of a continued lesson in terms of embracing that struggle. I think Kyle wore a shirt at Mount Tremblant that most people could see, both on stage when he talked ahead of time and throughout the weekend, that said, embrace the suck. And so I applaud you both for talking about moments where the struggle is there, the struggle is real, acknowledging the struggle, and using that for the power of good that it can provide. What I will say is that on my end, I have learned that when I put perspective in play, and so something might be going wrong, and it might be something I cannot control. Most often it is something I cannot control. If I put a little perspective in play and I sit there and think about, okay, let's look at the totality of the day. Let's look at the totality of the month, totality of my life. How big is this issue? Yes, maybe very quickly I want to get back home because I have something that I need to do back home, or I have a connecting flight and there are dependencies. But if I get there a day later, what will happen? And when I put a little bit of perspective in that, my mind and my opportunity opens up. And then because my mind and my opportunity opens up, I'm a lot more approachable in these scenarios. Because if I'm wearing that struggle, I'm closing down, I'm shutting people off, I'm abrupt with people, I'm pushing through and I'm wanting it my way. But if I understand the perspective, I'm like, hey, let's collaborate on this problem together. And you know what? Inevitably, when I change my attitude, which is the one thing I can control, someone along the way might change their attitude, whether it's somebody that might be like, hey, I can get you on this seat. It's middle row back, but I can get you on this seat. All right, because I changed my attitude. Or to your point, Barbee, you run into somebody or a group of somebody's where you're having meaningful conversation. You talked about somebody that you ran into on a flight recently coming down to Atlanta in March of this year for the Publix, and how and that's become a recurring relationship with for you. Can you go into that story a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Her name is Annie. And I met her, 30 years ago. And she was a news reporter and I was on TV talking about a triathlon. And like many people say, well, I could never do that. And I said, sure, you could. Just reach out to me whenever you're ready. Fast forward 10 years, she reached out to me. We got her through. She finished that triathlon. And then we just would periodically run into each other. Milwaukee, we call small walkie. So it's not uncommon to meet someone and then continually run into them. Well, time passed and I hadn't really seen her until I was heading to Atlanta for the Publix half marathon and she was on my flight. And we chatted at the baggage claim area. And here's something that I've learned to put in play. And this is a tip that everyone can use. We both said, hey, we should get together for coffee sometime. Cue, sometime will never happen. I said, take out your phone, open your calendar, and let's put it in. And we did that. And that turned into now a recurring meeting where we're having coffee every couple weeks. We're talking about life. We're talking about her physical health, her challenges, what she can do, what she's controlling. And we happened to meet yesterday. And it turns out that she went down this new health journey and she ran into a woman named Deborah Blaze who does 29029. I do 29029. I don't have any idea who Deborah Blaze is, but that connection now has got her very intrigued about 29029. She may not do it, but what she's learning from me and what she's learned from Deborah, she's able to carry on in her life. And I gave her a brand, one of the branding squares from Mount Tremblant. And that has connected now Annie to 29029 and the community. And she heard stories and she knows about resilience and things that I've gone through, things that she's gone through. So again, just these happen chance meetings that, again, taking the time to be present, to not just say, oh, great, it's great to see you, but having a conversation, a meaningful conversation. And guys, never let a moment where someone says, let's get together sometime, and not pull out your calendar and get it on the books. Because when we do that, it will happen. How many times have we throughout our lives, yeah, let's get together sometime. And then we see this person 2 years later and we never did it. Life's precious, right? Memento vivere. So capture that moment and put it on your calendar.
And that is so powerful because I think you can do that not only for the first time that you get together, but then every time before you leave, when's our next get together? And then you can transfer it even more it's like you get done with vacation. Okay, it's easy to have such a dip after vacation. Okay, when's the next vacation? At least the dates. So we have it on the calendar. So we have something to look forward. And just to briefly go back to what you said, Sid, about perspective, because I think it is so incredible. I think perspective goes along with resilience so much. Not so much that we have to say. So we talk a lot about Kyle Peace Foundation. Kyle has cerebral palsy and he's bound to a wheelchair. Not the perspective that says my life has to be great because I don't have that. We can still have challenges going on in our life too, but also to zoom out on your perspective. We look this narrow a lot of times and we're so focused on our own problems. Well, if you're staring at your problems all the time, how can you zoom out from those? Like we have an observation tower that you guys have climbed here in hometown. You're intimately familiar with it. But getting up on top of there, you have a different perspective than where you are on the ground. I'm a pilot and I love getting in the plane and getting up 1,000, 2,000 feet above the ground because I can still see the detail on the ground. But my problems that seemed really big when I was in the midst of them are little dots when I get up. So how can you look at your situation and your problems from a different view? So I thought that was
Yeah.
great that you brought that up, Sid.
Yeah, I love that you put a much more visible analogy around that too, in terms of just the literally physical height that you get away from the problem and how it changes when you get that further away. I'll come back to you in a second, but I wanted to go, Barbee, you talked about creating commitments and you got into this, Eric, a little bit. There's a daily commitment that you have created for yourself that you have been doing long before you ever joined any of us on the mountain. Do you want to talk to us about that daily commitment?
Sure. I run 1 mile every day, and it started August 31st, 2022, I think. I think I'm going on year 3. I don't know. I'm on somewhere near 1,500 consecutive days. And why I did it is I have a very good friend, Brian Clevin, who runs a cardiac rehab program in a very small northern community in Wisconsin. And he's on over 5 years. And I was like, wow, I wonder if I could do that. And so he puts out every August, so it's probably coming out tomorrow. He puts out a 30-day challenge for the community, for his cardiac rehab patients. Can you commit to 1 mile a day? And he also allows the patients, if you can't run a mile, you could walk a mile. If you can't go the full mile, you can break it up, but try and get that at least 1 mile. So I thought that looks intriguing. And I honestly did not know if I could do it. It sounds simple. I say it's simple, but it's not easy. And I thought, all right, I'm going to do it. And I started in the end of August, and 3 years ago, coming up soon. And I went through the full month and I thought, that's kind of cool. And I also believe motion is lotion. And so I've had 4 knee surgeries, and I've really challenged myself on limiting the longer. And so I was doing lots of long things, but a couple times a week. Well, now at least if I just get 1 mile a day, it has actually helped my knee in the long run. But this isn't about running the mile. It truly isn't about running the mile. It's about, I made a promise to myself, and I want to honor that promise. And so the promise includes for me at least 1 mile running outside. Now that may shift at some point, but right now, 1 mile running outside. And so it generally takes 10 minutes or less. It's a process to get to that 10 minutes or less, because sometimes in Wisconsin, it's minus 20. All right. There's never bad weather, only bad clothing, right? Right, guys? So I load it up. I got and out the door I go. I've run in airports in a departure area because I'm like, where am I going to run? I can't run around So I've literally this past spring in Hartford, Connecticut, ran from one side of the departure to the other side of the departure. And I got it done. I get up at 3:45 on Friday morning in Mount Tremblant, and I get it done. And I did it after. So it's truly about the commitment and the promise I make to myself. I like to do it first thing in the morning because I've and I don't want to say I've checked the box, but I've done that thing. I've committed, I've honored my promise, and then my day is it's spectacular. There's a book about Make Your Bed. It's done by, I can't remember who the author is. Same thing. First thing he does is he makes his bed because that's his commitment. That's his promise. And then everything else, the rest of the day, it's okay. And that's how I view this mile a day run. And I am going to do it as long as I can.
Absolutely. Admiral William McRaven, former Navy SEAL and also a former provost at University of Texas, shared that story. And it's a great story. He goes into a lot of daily life habits that can come from that. Speaking of a daily life habit, Eric, you talk about putting yourself out there a lot. Do you want to do a little bit of a connection train to close us out on how putting yourself out there has enabled things for you to happen?
Yeah. So I've had to do that being a dentist, having that be my job. I have to be able to get to know people really quickly. And so I've learned to ask really good questions. It's not comfortable for everybody, and I get it. But the things that are on the other side of asking some of those questions are just incredible. So you meet somebody, you run into somebody, I don't know, I'm feeling frozen. What do I say? I like to ask the question, what do you like to talk about? Everybody likes to talk about something. What do you like to talk about? You're sitting next to somebody on a plane and it looks like they might want to have a little bit of conversation. Obviously, hey, where's your final destination? What have you been up to? But what do you like to talk about? Man, the number of conversations that I've had from that. And then if you want to go a step deeper with people that you know, anybody who feels just a little bit off, like there's something with their body language, asking the question, how are you really doing? Because how are things going? Oh, fine, good, great. Doesn't tell us crap. So we have to be willing to go beyond oh, hey, Sid, what's up? Oh, good. All right. Great talk. See you later. If we want to have this level of community and this level of friendships, we have to be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable and ask some of those questions to really get to know people.
Yeah, agree. And can I add, and listen to their answers. Like, look into their eyes warmly, like you believe in them, and truly listen to what they're telling you.
The most interesting person in the room is not the person with the best stories. It's the person who asks the best questions. Think about that the next time you're in a group. Who's the person? I love this quote too. People will forget what you say, but they will never forget how you make them feel. So showing empathy, looking them warmly in the eye, asking them questions, and then reflecting back and listening exactly as you said, Barbie, that's the secret sauce.
Yeah, you mentioned your phone in several different episodes, Eric, and the phone and the world of communications. I work in this world professionally. It has given us a lot, but it also has taken it from us. And Barbie, to your point, it has taken from us the ability to more directly, more frequently look people in the eye and connect with them, and not necessarily just process our response, but process what they're saying and have a real conversation based off of what they're saying as opposed to what I want to say. And with the phone, it becomes so dismissive. I mean, there's applications that in the early days were 140 characters of text and that was it. Text messaging is based off of limited communication. And so I think that that's an important one. I think this conversation has been great. I know we're going to continue to get into more stories like this, but we want to stop here. I do want to tee up one thing for everybody. In terms of our next storyline, something that we've talked a lot about is the Kyle Pease Foundation. And Barbie just came off the mountain in Tremblant, where she got to spend a lot of time with Kyle Pease himself. We're all connected in one way or the other, not only to each other's lives, but also through the Kyle Pease Foundation. And that has been very meaningful. And not just because of the connection point from the power of giving, and also from the power of inspiration and connection. And so our next episode, we're actually going to have our first guest on. We're very excited about that. Kyle himself is going to join us. And so there's going to be 4 of us kind of talking through our storylines. And so I hope that you tune into that episode as soon as it comes out. In the meantime, thank you guys for your conversation today. Always try to remember to be where your feet are. And Barbie?
Momento vivere. Remember to live.
Perfect. Thank you guys.